Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Second snow day edition, I guess. Man, February is hard to talk about hot races, but that is what we are talking about today. We are talking all about the question on everyone's mind: how do I do Leadville in under 9 hours?
Right.
Specifically, the Leadville bike. Let's be clear, we're not talking about running the Leadville 100.
Yeah, I mean, if people keep having all these carbs and stuff, that's really
true.
making them fast. Yeah.
Yeah, 200 grams an hour, and we can
That's
maybe...
the secret.
Anyway, before we get into it, Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk about Leadville, and I think, February blahs are a real thing. So we've talked about mixing up your training. We've talked about pacing for the year, remembering that it's still perhaps just February when you're listening to this, and it's probably still a ways to your race. So don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay. You want to do a little bit of something every day and a little bit of variety, but it also doesn't have to be perfect in February, right? So give yourself some grace, especially in February, and check that you've been fueling, that you've been cooling those indoor workouts, lots of fans, lots of cool temps. And then also taking those rest days and rest weeks. Sometimes if you're not following a plan, especially, but even when you are following a plan, it's easy to sort of like start erasing and shifting things where it's like, oh, I haven't taken a rest day in a long time, or maybe a rest week, right? Where it's like actually deloading, maybe taking a few days off the bike even, especially if you're feeling a little burnt out. 2 or 3 days off the bike, off of even like training is pretty magical. So certainly okay to do a little reset, go on maybe a little staycation or vacation, check in with family, and then, get back at it.
Absolutely. All right. All of this leads into our question today, which is, as I said, Leadville in sub 9. So this is in reference to someone who just started the Consummate Athlete Leadville 100 mountain bike training program.
And that's in all caps, the Leadville training plan.
Yes, and we'll include a link to that in the show notes if you are, in fact, starting on your Leadville journey.
That's right. And I should say you can start this plan. It starts in January every year, January to race day in August. So it's a pretty awesome plan from that perspective, because it's sort of like we all get going January 1st, and then it takes you to race day. Now, you can also start this in really February, March. People will still get the plan, and it does sort of accommodate and bring you up to speed on it. It does assume that you haven't been completely inactive, but you can always book a phone consult to sort of like customize it a little bit if you are sort of like a special case from that perspective. And then we also have a plan that starts 3 months out, like most of our plans for Leadville as well. So we'll link to both those plans. And then as always, you have the option to get 3-month plans as well, which would be, we'll talk probably a bit about customization and these ambitious goals as we go through today's podcast.
Yeah. Now, before we get into the question, quick note about your plans. So if someone is doing any other 100-mile mountain bike race, is this a good plan for that?
We actually have a 100-mile 3-month plan you could get. So I do try and steer people to not get these like specific event plans, because they are set to the race day. So it is a little clunky to move them around. If say you're doing a 100-miler that's in September, like Shenandoah or something like that, it's not probably the greatest one for that. People like it because it's 8 months, and you and I have gone back and forth on like, well, I don't know how we solve this. Like, do we just make 8-month plans, but then it's not starting on January 1st? So in any case, I would say you get that, and then you maybe pair it with like our base plan, or again, consider our 3-month made for you plans, which do take a lot of this guesswork out. You just might stack 1 or 2 of those together to get to your 100-miler.
Yeah, so we'll include links to all of that in the show notes. Just wanted to clarify that, because I know that's a common thing. The Leadville plan is very specific to Leadville. There's a lot of links and notes and stuff.
I always think it would just get annoying, but like if you were, but it wouldn't be a waste. Like I think especially if you're doing like something at altitude, it would probably be fine. Like I understand, but it does reference Leadville explicitly multiple times. So
well, and there's certain things about Leadville that are worth specifically training for, just like any other 100 might have specific.
If you were doing like the Margie Gesick, which is much more technical, not at altitude. It's also in the fall, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure, Margie's in the fall. So like, I don't think heat is usually as much of an issue. So like, there's just a lot of factors that Leadville has that like another 100-miler mountain bike race is not like Leadville, which is almost closer to like a gravel race as much as it's not.
Yeah, which we will get into momentarily, because the question is, this person is in it, they're training's going well, but they have one question. I'd really like to make sure my training is targeting the 9-hour buckle at Leadville. I would still view the 12-hour buckle as an accomplishment, but I'd like to shoot for the moon. Is there any tweaking or changing to the default training plan to ensure that training is targeting a 9-hour finish? Any feedback is appreciated.
Yeah. And so I propose this to you as a podcast question because I think it's a good one, but also you have spoken a little bit, I know even with your coach, David, who's the Leadville run record holder twice over, very good runner, but also accomplished coach and your coach. Just about this idea, like the people who are struggling to get to that 12-hour finish at Leadville for the bike, it's 12 hours or else like it's not a finish. There's no belt buckle for you. So you sort of have to be under 12 hours. And then there's a 9-hour big belt buckle. And so the question would be like the people, Keegan Swenson doing 6 hours or whatever he's doing now at the elite field in Leadville bike race, 100 miles, versus the person struggling at 50% of that pace or twice as long at 12 hours. If do they have to work as hard? What is the difference? Are they following the same training plan? Like, what is the thing there? And so you say, like, you think that they actually often are working as hard.
I actually would argue they're working harder. And
now,
I figured
in training or on the race day or both?
Could be both.
Okay.
Like, this is, my assumption being that someone is going out and giving it their all on race day. Mm-hmm. So if you think about time times rate of perceived exertion, let's say, let's use that as our metric. So Keegan is probably at an 8 of perceived exertion all day to get this record, right? And he's out there for 6 hours. So I'm going to do some math here. 6 times 8 is 48. Someone who's out there for 12 hours is also probably doing an 8 in terms of their perceived exertion. They're just going slower at that perceived exertion.
Well, or you could argue, like, even if they were at 6 or 7, because, like, in theory, you aren't going as intense the longer you go. Those things are inversely related. But, like, 7 times 12 is still going to be more, right? I think. Hopefully, we haven't
84.
messed up that math. Yeah, okay.
So you're still almost double because you're out there for longer. And I do think those people are pushing to their absolute max, even if their heart rate is depressed, even if their power is dropping. That doesn't necessarily mean that their perceived exertion is dropping.
Well, that's why we have that third metric,
exactly.
Right? It shouldn't be coupled to those other things always.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is my argument is that, the people at the back, honestly, how do I put this? I realized this when I was in Sulphur Springs. I realized it when I was in Outlaw 100. When you're winning a race, it's a lot easier to go harder. It's so hard to keep going when you're like, when just finishing is going to be the big thing. When you're winning, you have someone chasing you. You have a lot of impetus to keep going quickly.
Well, and I don't know if it was on one of our podcasts or someone else's, but it made a lot of sense to me where when you know you're going to win or you think you're going to win, and you're fighting for that. Keegan Swenson's trying, like even last year, he was racing himself. No one was like that close, but he was trying to beat his record for Leadville. And so he's got that in his mind. And so the pain is worth it because he might beat his record. And so for you, like you were winning, that would be great. They're going to celebrate you as a great human if you win. So for you to push to that 9 or even 10, I think everyone, when we think about perceived exertion rate, it's like in the moment, how hard is this? So probably you're right that most people are like a 6 or a 7 most of the day, but most people in like a Leadville or something like that would start emptying the tank towards the end, but not everyone. But like certainly Keegan was like in a lot of pain towards the end.
I was going to say, we watched a lot of the video, and I would give him a 10 for those last few miles, deep. For sure.
Which you would assume he would be. But the question would be like, if he wasn't going to get his record, he probably would have backed off and not like gone for it, right? And similar for you, like, you were probably like, I'm going to push because it's worth it because everyone's going to celebrate and I'm going to win, whatever that encompasses, right? But you're right, because the person at the back no one's really going to celebrate this probably.
Well, and you saw this at Leadville when I was racing and you were at Twin Lakes. You saw it when you watched the videos of it and everything. When David Roche comes in first, the wall of noise that he gets at every aid station.
I'll try and find the video that David posted, but like I told Molly, like I was in tears, and like I like David, but like I don't like. It's not like I'm like that like tied to this, but it was just this like overarching, just like wall of like overwhelming screams as he came into Twin Lakes. It's just wild.
And then you get the person who's like, just sort of back of the pack, like they're not quite at the cutoff, but they're like close. Nothing.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
they'll have their friends and family cheering for them, but compared to the like kudos you're getting from the crowd, the further up you are. So yes, I'm going to argue that it is much harder to be towards the back. And the other, so that's one thing that David and I have talked about. The other
during the race, yes.
The other thing David and I have talked about, and you and I have kind of argued a little bit about, is the genetics of it all, the DNA of it all.
Right.
To some extent, we cannot outtrain our genetics. We cannot outrun our genetics. And unfortunately, like, some people are genetically really gifted at this stuff. That's why they're professional.
And perhaps to a point, like, I mean, I'm pretty fit. I'm pretty genetically gifted, but like I cannot run, I don't think, as fast as David can run. Like maybe like I could run with him during the race. Like when he's running 100 miles, I could probably keep up for a while. But when he runs very fast, my legs would never go that fast for even like a fraction, right? It's like when people try and run at the marathon world record pace, who are another series of genetic freaks, right? Like when we're talking 4-minute mile pace, this is not the pace that most people can run for any duration of time.
Well, and everyone has their own genetic gifts, right? Like David wouldn't be able to keep up with you on the mountain bike.
Right.
And similarly, my one Stronger Publishing author, Misha, so Misha Pell, Canadian track Olympian, 400-meter sprinter, like she and I have run together. And like we joke, like she can't keep up with me beyond like 1 mile, like 1 mile of a run with me, and she's hurting. On a track, I can't keep up with her for 2 meters.
Right.
I can't
and
get
so
out of
the debate would be like, how much is genetic and how much is like, you know, you just train a lot. That was, I think the run you did with her was her longest run of the year, and it was one of your shortest.
Yeah.
And so there is that training element, but then you also say like, especially for the speed, like the speed that Misha runs, I would never, like I can't run that fast. And I don't think that was like, even if I started when I was younger, I don't know that would have been something that my body would have done.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems unlikely.
And, you know, this is like, you know, 15 years ago when Michael Phelps was doing what he was doing in the Olympics with the swimming. People magazine was covering like his hands are the size of dinner plates and his feet are like flippers.
Right.
He's got webbed, I don't know. Like all of the things they were saying about him were like actually really mean when you take them out of context. This guy's a freak. But the point being, yes, like these top level, like the Keegans, the Michael Phelps, whatever, we all talk about them and we're aware that they're kind of genetic freaks. Mm-hmm. Like we joke about it, but we all are very aware of that. But I would say even for us, like normal athletes, we all have different genetic, you know,
where you're started, right? Like I think that makes sense. And so the speed they say sprinters are born and then marathoners are made or something. And that's probably true to a point. But again, like I think there's some people that probably just have the VO2 max and they have these things. And so they're starting at a higher point. Now, that's not to say that someone couldn't train and really like dedicate themselves, but there's obviously going to be advantages that, as you say, height would be one factor. We know that certain things are related to how well you get rid of heat and these types of things.
Well, and actually, it's funny. I've been doing this article on GLP-1s for Canadian cycling and been really digging deep into that.
And these are like weight loss drugs for anyone who hasn't.
Ozempic, Wegovy, etc. And even that has really led me down this rabbit hole of like one of the guys who basically found GLP-1s back in the 80s, like found the peptide.
Like discovered it. Yeah. Can you say found? It's
found?
Like he found it in a mine.
Yeah. So what he said is his legacy that he is so proud of is that now people understand because we have a medication for it now, people understand on like a philosophical level that obesity is something that actually isn't 100% controllable by willpower or sheer dieting. And everyone I talked to, every cyclist that I talked to who's using these, like they all had the same thing of trying everything. Like it's not that they haven't done the diets or this, that, and the other. Nothing has worked. Nothing has stuck. So I think, yeah, like body comp, also extremely genetically influenced. Like all of these things lead to whether or not you're going to make it to 9 hours or sub 12.
I think so. I think as much as that like is an uncomfortable thing that I just like talking about, it is a factor, right? Like power to weight is a factor, especially at a Leadville race where it's not very technical. It's not so long that, equipment and your experience, like these are all things that contribute, but at some point you are climbing a lot at altitude in a bit of heat usually. And so it is, as much as I don't like it to be mathematical, there is like a mathematical equation that you need to bring your body up a lot of hills in a certain amount of time, right? We're talking about 9 hours. And so you can sort of math out this a little bit. Of course, you'll still see the person with the big FTP who's been on Trainer Road and they crash coming down the descent and they just didn't know how to ride their bike because they've been riding indoors, working on their watts per kg because they thought that's what mattered and they forgot about that. Or the person who doesn't fuel or the person who doesn't pace well. Like all these things are factors, but obviously this race, when we look at like the parts that make up the success or the finish under 9 hours, there's obviously like a big chunk that's related to that really watts per kg.
And someone who's having to fight their power to weight is going to have a much harder time than someone who naturally has a lower body
like out of the box,
right?
Well, there's the body size even, right? Like at some point you're also like you're a 6 foot tall man, like that's just the situation, right? Like and then whatever your VO2 max is somewhat genetically determined. Like you can change this, but like there is a starting point.
And that's actually, it's funny, the VO2 max is really what started me down this like weird philosophical conundrum of the what does it all mean? Like where did genetics play into it? Because I did a VO2 max test 1.5 years ago. And when I went into it, I was actually really nervous going into it because I was aware that like, yes, there's a training component, there's all this conditioning, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's also a huge genetic component. And if my VO2 max had been low, how would would I be okay with that? Understanding that, yeah, maybe I could shift it a little bit, but it kind of is what it is as someone who already trains at a pretty high level and like does all this stuff. So how was I going to feel about it?
Well, and I think I said to you last night, like you had the fastest 100 miler in May. Maybe that weight that you did that at is an okay weight because we were talking about weight and like so, no one's ever comfortable with their weight. And I'm like, but that was a pretty fast weight, whatever that was. And so sometimes we like think, oh, this has like changed everything. And it's like, well, up until this point you were happy. So whatever it is, you should be happy, I guess.
It was a weird moment because like I got new cross-country skis and cross-country skis apparently are weight rated, which I did not realize.
Yeah,
this was
my
like,
new invention. I need to remember that.
Yeah. This was news to us is the length of your ski is not actually determined by height. It's determined by weight because of like the bounciness of them for cross-country skis. I have no idea what regular skis, maybe it's regular skis are height. I have no idea. Anyway, so I'm right between two. And we opted for the longer pair. And when I tell you that was actually a difficult moment for me, it was actually a very difficult moment for me. It's fine. Everything's great. But it did send me spiraling a teensy bit internally. And then, yeah, I was like, grumping to you about it. And yes, that's you. It was a very good point.
And this is sometimes why, like, because it's like, I mean, most people, like, it's just pretty stable. And so that's why I'm sort of like, we are where we are. And then, like, we can focus on the power and the consistency and the skills and these other elements, right, that do contribute. But as far as the specific question of the plan, this person was asking.
Yeah, this poor guy, he's like, I just wanted to know about altitude. And here we are just like philosophically, what does sport mean to be an athlete? Right. So we just wanted to caveat this because there are people that can do everything that we were about to suggest for a sub 9 hour, things that will make you go faster in Leadville. They can do everything perfectly. They can follow every training plan to the letter, and they are still just not going to make 9 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's just a reality that we need to point out because it is insane to say, oh yeah, anyone can do this if they just work hard enough. It is like the biggest myth of the like American dream of just like, if you just work hard enough at whatever, you're going to get the thing. That's just not the case. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and like maybe that's fair for like the 12-hour, but definitely the 9-hour starts getting like it's just more selective, right? Like there's just no way around it. There's so many factors, like we talked about, sort of like the uncomfortable. Like there is a power to weight, and I would say like for most men, I hate like talking about power to weight numbers, but it's like if you look at a graph, I have like a graph that I've made up of like all the people I've worked with, and like sort of pulled some other data. It's like in around 4 watts per kg. But like how you measure that watts per kg, because are you measuring it at altitude, and like what duration am I talking about? Like I'm talking about FTP, but like how do you determine FTP? So it's all so sloppy and messy. But what that usually means is like a lot of men, you're going to have to be like up towards 300 watts or higher
as your FTP, not your average.
And like whatever even FTP, like even for 20 minutes, like, and so this is like already like eliminated a lot of men, right?
Sorry, this is for the sub 9.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so from now on.
That's what I mean. Like for sub 12, it gets messier because like I think you have more skew space and people accomplish it in different ways, right? Like they're just really good going downhill. They have great experience. They pace and fuel really well. Whereas like it just gets tighter and tighter. Like the ways you can solve that problem, like it's sort of like the number of people keeps getting smaller and smaller until you get to Keegan Swenson at the, the pointy end of this thing. And so it's like there's only so many ways to do this, right?
Yeah. Okay, so for the duration of this episode, when we say Leadville, assume we mean a sub 9 at Leadville.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about. Is like, what's the difference? So in this plan, like, it's actually interesting to your point. Like the plan, I wouldn't change it a lot. As people get older, again, this gets harder to get sub 9 because we know that what happens as we get older, like inevitably we can slow it. We've talked a lot about that, but that would be a factor, right? So this is something not really changeable or controllable, but that's a factor.
So ultimately the training itself is the training.
Pretty much. Yeah. I would change it. Like older people that I work with, I've now coached people in their 70s, their 60s who have done this plan. So we do a little less intensity, a little less volume across many weeks, but still a lot of the key workouts have to be the same because they have to get their body around the same thing in the sub 12 hours usually, or whatever their personal best time is. And a lot of these people have done it before. They've gotten the sub 12 and then they're like, I want to beat that time. But they don't necessarily, in most cases, they're not necessarily going for that sub 9.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll say the training itself is stable, which leaves us a few different levers to pull. There's the so I'm going to I've heard you talk about this so much. I'm going to see if I can catch all of the ones that you would say. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Training specificity. So actually going to hills, doing long climbs that are going to be similar to Columbine, doing descents that are going to be similar to coming down Columbine. Mm-hmm. So the actual more technical skill of it all, the actual race simulation of the course itself.
Yep.
Then there's the altitude element, so heat/altitude. So training that, and we'll talk about the different ways we can do that. Mm-hmm. There's the dialing in of the gear and the nutrition, so making sure that your bike is as lightweight and optimized for Leadville as it can possibly
resilient,
be.
so that you're not on the side of the trail.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a balance there, but
That's why I said for Leadville.
But yes, like you'll see people, I want to do sub 9, and then they're riding like a free ride, like
exactly.
an enduro bike with big tires.
Sorry, Leadville's not going to be comfortable. I think we can just underscore that, like, if you want to go sub 9, this is not going to be a comfortable sub 9 hours. This is going to be a really sucky 9 hours of your life.
It depends how close to the limit. Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're a 7-hour person and you're riding a 9-hour, it's not too bad, but yeah.
If you're someone who thinks 9 is going to be the moonshot, it's not going to be a comfortable 9 hours. So then there's the mental training side of it. Like, how are you going to be when it gets uncomfortable at hour 5 and you're going to be tight to the time and it's going to come down to the wire and you have 4 more hours of down to the wire to go. So we've got the mental side. We've got the nutrition side. How can we make sure we're taking in enough? And is that going to work at altitude and in the heat?
Right.
Let's see what else. Oh, we have the crew, because I do think when you're going sub 9 and you're going to be tight to the wire, your transitions become so much more important. You cannot take time. Every minute's going to count. And every minute that you spend in an aid station is a minute that you're not going to have on that next uphill.
And it's tight. Like a lot of times, like depending on, again, if you're a 7-hour person doing 9 hours, it's not that tight. But a lot of times.
We have seen the 9.
So the last person we were there to support a little and cheer a little bit. And it was like, what was it? 8:56 or something. So it's like if he had sat down or done the we messed up the pack or I'll run and get you like a ice bandana. Like
my music got caught on a handlebar. And...
Let's just say you get knocked over. Yeah. But I mean, those aid stations are hectic. There was a big crash this year. It took out beers, right? Yeah. One of the top guys got taken out in Twin
Not
Lakes.
like a tray of beers. Guy named
Matt
Beers.
So yeah, I think you hit a lot of them there. And that is really the thing is like how well, so like if you live in Colorado, that's probably a feather in your cap. Like if you live at altitude, a lot of people who do the race do live at altitude. They're attracted to this because it's close to home and probably it's in the mountains. They like mountains. And then also maybe they like it because it's at altitude. So that's not to say that you can't do it coming from sea level or something else. But a lot of times what people are doing is these like trips. Maybe they go to qualify the year before, or they go and do like a camp earlier in the year. A lot of people from what we've worked with or from Ontario will even go for either the camp or the stage race ahead of it to do a bit of pre-riding so they're familiar with the environment, but then also test out some of this stuff. Like Molly says, like, do the tires work on the soil and the terrain? Are you getting flats?
Is your stomach going? Because
when you fuel like you plan to,
altitude changes things.
What is the pacing like? Like a lot of people mess it up by doing a 20-minute time trial to start off with, and then they still have to ride for, 8 hours and 40 minutes or less. So that's like not a great pacing strategy. So that sets the day off really poorly usually. So just knowing that. And so that's experience. So when someone comes to me and says, I've done multiple 100-milers, I've done lots of endurance stuff, I've worked maybe with an RD on my fueling. These are things that are positives. Like I'm more likely to bet on this person and their goals, the more of these things we can sort of check off. Now, if you haven't done that, that's okay. But like this person says, maybe they're going to aim for 9 hours, but they're happy with however the day goes because they've never been to Leadville. They've never done a 100-miler. They've never done a race over 2 hours. They've never ridden a mountain bike. Like all these things are starting to be like less in your favor when we're starting to make a bet on this like sub 9 hour finish.
Yeah. I should also add financial is another one in there. How much money are you willing to spend? Because I'm going to argue if you are not from Colorado, so assuming you don't live near the course and you can't drive there tomorrow and you don't live at altitude elsewhere, you're going to be in 10 grand easy to do it well.
And you're thinking just to go there for the race?
To be able to go there, say 10 days ahead of, like if you want to optimize, like if you really want to do this and you're asking this question, you need to be there between a week and 2 weeks ahead of time at altitude.
For sure. Yeah.
You probably should have gone there for another 2 to 3 week training block
or somewhere else at
before.
Altitude. Yeah.
Somewhere,
it doesn't happen.
And there's not many places that are that altitude or even close to that altitude, especially if you're you're going to be in Europe going somewhere at altitude to get somewhere warm enough.
I mean, you could just go somewhere else in Colorado or something that's like more fun to ride. But.
Sure. And then there is we had an altitude tent, right? Like we have both done Peter's done the Leadville bike, had the Canadian record for a lot of years. I've done Leadville, did not nail it, cracked my ankle. If you haven't heard that story, go back to 2024. But both times we had, like, you were in an altitude tent when you were doing Leadville. We were in an altitude tent before I did Leadville. I don't know that I would 100% recommend that to everyone.
It's a tough one, yeah. I'm still pretty mixed on it. The sleep is just not amazing, and yeah, it's just sort of clunky, but perhaps that helped. It's hard to say. Like, you adapted pretty quickly to altitude, and that's really the game when you're coming not from it, is like how quickly you can get back up and what percentage can you recover of if we're going to use FTP. Let's say you come in and you think your FTP is 300, but then when you go to altitude, we know we're going to lose some. So is that a 10% drop or a 6% drop or a 5% drop? And then you want to minimize that as best we can. Right. And that's why someone who's at altitude is going to already be in better shape with that, presumably.
But like either way, you're spending money, like to go there, to have a tent, to do
and just
whatever.
Anything in that lifetime series is probably a qualifier that you've done, or at least the lottery. So like, yeah, you're already like in registration fees. So
this is just not a cheap thing, no matter who you are. And then, yeah, the practical is the other thing. You mentioned the 20-minute time trial that a lot of people do at the beginning that blows them up. Pacing is actually going to be a huge thing for the sub 9, especially if you know it is going to be like you're probably aiming for, say, 8:45 to give yourself a little bit of slack in there somewhere, but like your pacing strategy for that has to be so on point because you don't have room for error. And the error is also going out too hard, going too fast in a section.
For sure. And so one of the workouts that's in there a few times in our training plan, I use a fair bit. It's sort of, what is it called? 4 hours hard. So there's some 3 and some 4. Some people all use a 5 even, where you're going quote unquote hard, but it's not hard. It's like race pace. So it should actually be more like your 9-hour race pace. So it's not that hard, but it gets annoyingly hard once you get, to 4 hours or more. And so what it's saying is, even if you're at, I was getting ready mostly at sea level when I did this back in 2011. And what I was looking at is for similar amount of climbing, we have a pretty similar terrain, as much as we don't have mountains here. Like it is like 100 and 200 meter climbs, just repeated and repeated and repeated. So I would just sort of like, how much climbing is in the race, the distance of the race. So how much climbing per kilometer or mile that you're going to have to do. So in a 4-hour ride, can we get in whatever, say 5,000 feet of climbing, right? And that's a lot of climbing. But this is sort of what we're trying to math out, is if the race, I can't remember, it's like 3,000 meters, I think, right? So that's what, 9,000 feet. So say it's like even 4,000 feet in 4 hours or something like that. You got to design the route and then you need to ride it, but it needs to be under that pacing limit, however you're doing that, heart rate, feeling, breathing, power. Can you finish that and then still feel like you can continue, but also have fueled in the way that you want? And even at sea level, that should be like over, right? In theory, you should be faster. So that's, I think, why I have 5,000 in my head, is that it's like you should almost be able to do a bit more in that 4 hours, because at altitude, we know you're going to be pulled back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that's where at home you can sort of do these trials that are actually moving you away from watts per kg and some of these other things. They're actually saying, like, when you go out and ride your bike in the environment, maybe it's hot, and you use all the race gear, can you do this even for half of the distance? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is like a trial. Some people will do like a 50-mile mountain bike race, and it's maybe hilly. And so we get confidence, we get some data points, some experience by saying you've done a 50-miler in 4 hours and 30 minutes, right? That math probably works. And maybe it had single track in it, so it was like a little slower. But these are indicators where, like, you should probably be able to do a 50-miler at faster pace than you do this other one, right? And again, you have to do a bit of conversion and skew and fudging there if it's not at altitude, if it's a little more mountain bikey, like, are these pluses or negatives as far as your times? But those are the things that we'd like to see in training, is that you're starting to see, like, oh yeah, like this is a possibility. I have gone this far in this amount of time, even ignoring the terrain and the climbing. Like, have you ever ridden 50 miles in 4 hours? That's what we're saying, 4 hours and 30 minutes for 50 miles. Yeah. 52 miles, I think, technically, because the race is 104 or 103 miles or whatever it is. So these are the things that we can start checking off. And what we see, even with the 12-hour folks, sometimes I push on this a little harder, is you're signing up for this, but like you aren't training in this way that this is even a reasonable thing to do in training, and you're not accomplishing that speed. So for this 12-hour person, we said we were only going to talk about 9 hours, but for that 12-hour person, can you ride 50 miles in 6 hours on a road bike, on a flat road even? And often, yes, but not always. And sometimes we'll see people go and it's this moonshot, but it's not really a moonshot, right? And that sounds harsh, but it is a big expenditure. So in the past, I have actually, and I'm trying to increasingly be like, this is just going to not happen, right? Like, mathematically, this isn't going to happen.
Which is a really, again, I said it at the beginning here, it's a really hard thing to tell someone that, like, no, like, this isn't a thing. Mm-hmm. The American dream is dead. I don't know.
Well, it's not a moonshot, right? Like, a moonshot means that, like, you're still doing the math to say that, like, we're getting close to the moon. Are we shooting at the moon? I don't know what we're doing in this moonshot.
I'm not really sure why we're shooting at the moon.
Right, but this is the idea that, like, if you can't ride on a flat road on a road bike and do this in 6 hours, then this probably just isn't the event for right now.
Yeah.
In a few years, maybe so, but probably a different event. Maybe it's a road fondo or something to gain some experience and a fitness, right? Like, something like this just takes a long time to build that fitness up and that experience.
100%.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess, like, the question here becomes, we just kind of talked through all of the different things. Are there any... do we have any hacks or anything that we would suggest this guy, especially now we're in mid-February, so we're 6 months out,
Well, and let's assume this person is in spitting distance.
Yeah.
It's a logical thing. They've done Leadville before. They finished in 9 hours and 54 minutes. This would be a great candidate, right? At least we know that you have done the specific thing and you're pretty close.
Yeah. So how would you...
So we have a post, Leadville Faster. We'll link to it. You can probably Google Leadville Faster, but if you do Google Leadville Faster Consummate Athlete, probably more likely you're going to find it.
We'll just put it in the show notes.
But these are the things. So this is things like you shouldn't have a baggy jersey. If you have good support, you can carry less stuff with you, but you want to have enough stuff with you so that you're fueling appropriately and you have tools. Really testing your tires so that they roll fast, yes, but I don't worry so much about rolling resistance as much as I worry about the air staying in the tires, because if you have to stop, that's not good. Not stopping is also a thing, trying to really minimize it. Usually in Twin Lakes, because I crashed, we do encourage people to stop and just take their pack and then carry on. So it's a 10-second stop or something like that, right? Pretty small stops, short stops. We talked about aerodynamics. Now things like helmets, anything you can do in that way, especially as we're moving faster and faster. Related to that is group riding. You will see people who are mountain bikers, never ridden on the road. But then we get into this Leadville situation where when you're up in those, you can save a lot of energy. It gets very windy on some of these flat stretches. As much as there's a lot of climbing in Leadville, there's actually a bunch of pretty wide open riding that's flattish where you can draft. And so if you're very good at group riding and staying out of the wind and maybe, yes, also not taking your fair share of pulls, this is going to probably help you finish a little faster because you were going faster across all these flats versus pushing into the wind because you didn't know you got popped out of the group, right?
Yeah. Now, for people who are home, it's winter, they're probably on the trainer right now. I think a couple things they can work on just right now at home in February. I think riding in heat, so I'm not saying turn off your fans, but I think right now everyone's so focused on cooling and staying as cool as possible on the trainer. But if you know you're trying to do Leadville and you're trying to do it fast, this is actually a great time to maybe wear that one extra layer. Keep cooling, don't be ridiculous about it, but I think practice some warmer.
I would say there's probably room if you've been training consistently and you're not struggling with motivation or burnout.
All on the assumption.
Then you could take Stephen Chung's been on our podcast a couple times. We have a post sort of for do-it-yourself heat training. And I would say once or twice a week, you could probably be sprinkling through some of this, finishing a workout a little hotter. So indeed, I would turn off the fan and add a little woolen hat, a toque, if you will. And then also a jacket and some gloves. And so we have details with that. So I'll try and remember to put that. Probably we could even update. I don't know if that's in the Leadville Faster, our updated post for the do-it-yourself heat training. But yeah, that would be a little cherry on top that you could add.
I would say the other one would be, especially when you're in the indoor trainer situation and you don't really need to stress on what your gut does, this is a great time to test your gut and see if you can add a bit more carbs. I think actually when we're on the trainer, we're a lot less inclined to fuel appropriately because the kitchen is right there. So we know we can,
well, it's just indoors. Why would you fuel it?
Yeah,
it's
obviously.
Not an adventure, right?
Yeah.
So
you'd get off and have a snack or whatever. But this is a perfect chance to try that. What does 90 grams of carbs feel like? What does 60 grams feel like? Can we do a bit more?
Well, and this is the person I'm still not sure with all this fueling stuff, to be honest, but it does seem like there's something there. And this person we're starting to see numbers like 300 plus, where there is a lot of work being done, and presumably you're also maybe training a fair bit. You are the person who probably should be fueling the intensity and then also the volume so that you're recovering faster, but also every session goes a little better. So if we can push 304 watts and then 305 watts and then 306 watts because of the fueling, and it might just be these little increments, but this would be the person where I think it's pretty clear that the recovery demands are much higher. You're training frequently and a lot. But then also the output is so high that you're just going through, you could be having multiple gels, right? This is the person that I think this applies to, that we're getting pretty extreme, really.
Yeah. And the other thing I'm thinking of, again, when you're on the trainer, it's winter, student of the sport. There are so many videos now. You can watch the entire Leadville race from the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. There's so many GoPro cams, so you can watch some of these pivotal moments. You can watch so many different YouTube documentary type things with people talking about their race.
Yep.
I remember how much you actually did of this for my race. You really started watching a ton of the videos about the run and figuring out what was going to be different about the run compared to the ride. And I think you actually probably learned more about it than I did because you were so nervous about that.
Yeah, you used that time. I think it makes a lot of sense. But I do think there's like a bit of like association that comes from watching those videos, even though it's not connected to your trainer in any way. Just simulating that a little bit. And the one thing you can do, there are head cams of Columbine now. And the interesting thing, I haven't done this yet, but Training Peaks Virtual, I haven't done this specifically for Columbine, I should say. But Training Peaks Virtual will let you upload GPX files. So you could upload the Columbine GPX or the Powerline GPX, and then you could actually ride it on your trainer, but you could actually watch the head cam for someone actually climbing up Columbine. And it wouldn't be a perfect one-to-one, but I could see that being like a really nice visual or mental connection that comes from doing a 1 hour harder effort. That's really all you're doing. I don't think the GPX is that magical. But then having the actual video at the head cam where you're starting to feel what it's like. And again, the pacing, the timing is going to be a little tricky to get perfect for like how fast you're actually going to go up the climb. But I would say that's like an emerging thing that we can play around with a bit more.
Yeah, and I think it helps the mental side of things. It's going to make everything feel less scary when you're seeing it because you're not seeing it for the first time, even if it is the first time you've been there.
Yep.
I'm trying to think if there's any other stuff I would be doing right now other than trying to save a lot of money because it's really expensive.
Well, that would be the one thing would be like some sort of trip. And it could be altitude. I don't think like it has to be to altitude. But the other thing to look at is just the racing, right? Like I do think that like getting in a few events that look like this, the 50Ks, the 50 miles, 100K, maybe that's a qualifier, are going to be part of that. And one of the things that comes out of those potentially, if they all are qualifiers, something like I'm actually racing Sea Otter this year, so we'll see how my Leadville journey goes. But you could also, any of them, you're going to maybe improve your start spot. And that's maybe a critical one that we should, it's good I remember that, that the 9 hour, you don't have to be in the front with all the pros per se, because you're not trying to finish in 6 hours, but you are trying to finish under 9. So it would be better not to be back with the people who are going to be struggling to finish in under 12 hours. You want to be up in the group so that you're not fighting so much to get through people. You're more with the people that are just moving at 9 hour pace. And then you're not going to waste a lot of time and energy, hopefully, in bottlenecks on the first climb or trying to bridge up to other groups. Like the ideal would be that you're just in a group that's pacing perfectly to 9 hours. Now that's, of course, everyone's on their own journey, but that would be, you want to find that, and finding it's tricky. But we know that you don't want to be at the back if you're trying to finish at 9 hours. You probably want to be middle to front of the groups, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Also, now would be the time to make any bookings. If you haven't done it already, do not leave hotels and stuff to the last minute. Do that now. Which, again, doesn't sound like a thing that should be part of a sub-9 journey, but there's not that many places to stay in and around Leadville. So accommodation and knowing your plan for it, not trying to figure that out the month before and ending up staying an hour away versus 30 minutes away or right in town.
Yeah, that Copper Mountain seems to be like the place a lot of people end up these days. It seems like it's harder and harder to stay in around Leadville, but yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I mean, I think hopefully that meandering conversation around the idea that it's all worth it, and wherever you put the flag that you're going to try and get, whether that's the finish or the 10 hour, it doesn't have to be based around the belt buckles even, but just, trying to get in there. And if you've never done it, I think the original question of this, like, they're going to appreciate if they finish under 12 hours, which I remind everyone, even if they're going back with some really ambitious time goal, is that this is a very hard thing and anything can happen on these days. So even just having that, what we call a seagull or a bee goal, where the day doesn't go perfect, but you keep going and you get that finish is still very worthwhile at something like this, where it is something that a lot of people dream of doing. So if you're able to go and do that and only get under 12 hours, I think you want to go and definitely make sure you get that finish.
It is actually funny. I don't think we would have answered this question in the same way had the person not said they would be totally psyched with a sub 12, but like, what's your thoughts for going sub 9? I think if they hadn't included that they'd be happy with sub 12, this episode would have been a 45-minute rant from us about how like the goal setting. But I think this was a very nicely set up question that's asking a really good question, but like with the understanding that
Yeah, it's a stretch goal. And they didn't give us a lot of details about like where they're at, right? Again, if they told me they had finished in 9 hours and 22 minutes, then okay, like what are the things? And usually there's at least a couple of those things around support, exposure to altitude, their fueling went horrible, their pacing went horrible, they used an enduro bike. Like there's something, at least one thing, and then we can train a little better, get them to a higher level. And then, okay, this is a great goal. This is going to be fun to watch, right? This is exciting. But when you don't know, then it is hard to sort of like give people the specific thing. So
yeah, so hopefully those were some good ideas. Of course, if you are doing Leadville and you want to kind of talk through which ideas maybe would move the needle most for you, you can always book a consult with Peter. Again, past Canadian Leadville record holder.
More importantly, I've worked with a lot of people who have done it.
More importantly.
Yes. But that's what this person's going to do is we have a phone consult book. So we're going to go through and sort of customize that plan a little bit for them and get them set up and sort of see what are the things we can sort of work on. But then that would be the other thing would be to look at something like a 3-month plan where we can really customize it, right? And further, I guess these people, if you do find it's nutrition, then it would be reaching out to one of the great RDs that we've had on the show, someone like Stevie Lynn Smith or Kylie. Kylie's, I think, is she over in Colorado too?
Kylie Van Horn is
in
Colorado.
Yeah. So these people who have experience with people who are trying to do these ambitious things to really go after fueling, right? And I think when you're trying to be really ambitious, that's where adding in these couple of professionals or team members, it sounds perhaps excessive sometimes, but it is when you are trying to get to that extra couple percents. It is where it's like if your skills are the problem, you need a bike skills person. If it's nutrition. If it's sports psychology, like you just unraveled mentally, then sports psych, mental performance consultant would be the person to look at. So trying to think about what is the area that you're really trying to improve on, and then getting the help that you need from there.
Love it. All right. With that, hit us up with any questions, racing, nutrition, training, all that fun stuff. Happy training, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.